What are we looking at here? Clearly, it's paint. Thick streaks of paint loosely applied at various angles, unblended. You can almost see the paintbrush making the strokes across the canvas. Nothing recognizable seems to be depicted here. At this distance, the image looks messy and abstract. But let's back up. At this distance, those loose brushstrokes perfectly resolve into a yellow shawl wrapped around a young woman in a billowy mint green dress who's laying back on a couch in an elegant room, an image of sweet afternoon repose, which is the name of this canvas from my favorite painter, John Singer Sargent. This difference between the close-up and the view of the whole canvas is the key to understanding Sargent's genius. Everywhere you look in this painting, you see his supremely confident looseness, a kind of painting you maybe wouldn't think to associate with a realistic representation of the world. And yet that's exactly the final effect, a realism that is somehow more true than finely detailed painting. Where did Sargent's confidence in this technique come from? Well, to understand that, you have to understand Sargent's teacher, Carolus Duran, a 19th century French painter who bucked the academic emphasis on outline drawing, in which you would essentially paint inside the lines, building up and detailing your canvas section by section until the whole thing came together. Duran taught his students to abandon outlines and focus on capturing the colors and tonal values of what they saw. In painting, tonal value refers to how light or dark something is, with black being the darkest and white the lightest. Everything you see exists along that spectrum, and Duran believed that if you captured all the tonal relationships in your canvas accurately, if you got the ratios right, you'd present the reality we see more honestly. In essence, his students had to learn to look at the world differently, flattening their sight to let objects melt into their values and colors and the two-dimensional shapes they make. Then they had to get these shapes onto the canvas in paint, never working on one section for too long so as not to throw those value ratios off, because the painting is always a unity, a delicate series of relationships. Duran's students learned to see beyond objects to the light and color effects that describe them. And what they discovered is that this two-dimensional way of seeing produced paintings that were more three-dimensional in effect than anything that began with an outline. It's a method Duran learned in part from Diego Velázquez, a Spanish painter who lived 200 years prior and was in many ways 200 years ahead of his time. If you look at Velázquez's career, you see him transition from the decorative conventions of his time to an earnest, revolutionary attempt to capture his impression of reality. Impression is, of course, the key word. Sargent came of age as the Impressionist movement, led by Claude Monet, flowered. He was friends with Monet, staying with, learning from, and even painting him on occasion. But Sargent was not usually counted among Impressionists with a capital I. He was part of a broader group, Impressionist with a lowercase I, in the way Velázquez was, in the way Duran was, in the sense that the impressions of light and color were his subjects. Sargent rapidly absorbed Duran's teaching and then exceeded him, a moment symbolized in his extraordinary portrait of Duran, which was honored by the Paris Salon of 1879 when Sargent was just 23. I mean, look at this face, the highlights on the forehead, nose, and lips, the upturned mustache, and the hair fully realized without a touch of fine detail. Look at how he conjures a ring with a drop of yellow paint. As the novelist Henry James wrote, the young Sargent presents the uncanny spectacle of a talent which, on the very threshold of its career, has nothing more to learn. This wasn't true, of course, but it spoke to Sargent's exceptional gifts. The Durand painting was a calling card for Sargent's portrait business, and high society came knocking en masse. Given how many he did, Sargent is known chiefly as a portrait painter, and he is, simply put, the greatest portraitist who ever lived, capturing all the glamour of the late Victorian and Edwardian ages. But a portraitist is not all he was. After this stunning painting of a wealthy socialite caused a scandal in Paris for being too racy, Sargent moved to England and soon embarked on what I think is his greatest work, Carnation, Lily, Lily, Rose. Sailing along the Thames one summer evening, he saw Chinese lanterns hanging amid the foliage and was instantly moved to capture that interplay of light. The only problem is that this magical light, as we all know, only emerges for a few fleeting minutes every evening, and only in the summers. Sargent worked for 2 years on the painting, patiently waiting each day for the special moment to arrive, at which point he would have his friends' daughters pose in white dresses and work feverishly while the light lasted. After painting and repainting again and again, he finally captured it. And here you can see the real merit of dialing in those values and colors, because what Sargent gets here by the accumulation of little effects is an atmosphere, a mauvish coloring that seems like it's in the air itself, which is what it really feels like to be outside on a summer evening. Sargent fused the lessons of Durand, Velázquez, the Impressionists, the Realists with his own singular talent to forge a style in which mere suggestions laid down with a practiced looseness resolve at the right distance into the world. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching. This episode was brought to you by Squarespace. If you don't know, you can use Squarespace to make websites for anything you might need. Want to make a site for your video content? Well, you can upload your video library directly to Squarespace and even sell access to that content. Or you can use the Squarespace Video Studio app to make pro-level videos within Squarespace and host your content on beautiful pages designed with their easy-to-use blogging tools. Basically, a Squarespace site is going to make whatever you're sharing or selling look professional, and that's going to help you get the word out, whatever that word actually is. Head over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch that site, go to squarespace.com/nerdwriter for 10% off your first purchase. Thanks guys, I'll see you next time.